Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Today, we're talking with David Siminoff. Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, David. How are you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on this show. Now, David, you've got a really impressive background. You went to Stanford for your undergrad as well as your MBA. You've worked as a screenwriter, and you've also founded Shmoop. Tell us a little bit about you personally.
Yeah, well, I actually spent the lion's share of my career on Wall Street as a professional investor, and I got very lucky with timing of the internet craze, invested heavily in the dot-com, what became a bubble, but I was investing in it in 94, 95, and rode that wave through the end of 99, where I sold most of my holdings, and then just kind of watched the world fall apart shortly thereafter.
Wow.
So yeah, nothing like being lucky and having a couple of good trades makes a career.
Sure, absolutely. What would you say was the pivotal moment that brought you to where you are today?
Really, I think it was meeting my wife in business school. I had started a company in Eastern Europe bartering American television programming to Russia just after the wall had fallen. And the world didn't really realize how quickly that part of the world was becoming commercial. So if we were quick and nimble, we could, make a very nice business out of it. And I met her the first day of Stanford Business School. She told me the 197 things I was doing wrong. And I said, my God, can I hire you and come work for me? So we commuted to Zagreb during the war and made a very nice business out of what became EastNet.
Wow, that's really something. You've really been all over the place. What led you to found Shmoop? What were the steps that brought you to that point?
I had wanted to be an English professor actually as an undergrad, and with extremely limited choices in life in doing that, and given my personality being all over the place, I get bored real quick. I thought better of that. And so this is really about me going back to that domain, being able to be a creative artist. I went to film school at USC. I got my MFA and worked for Fox for a little bit and a few other TV series. And lack of talent drove me to Wall Street. And so this is my way of coming back to try to do something both creatively rewarding and also good for the world. Because it's too hard to learn. And
Sure.
What Shmoop is all about is making that whole process of finding little ziplets of light in the darkness a little bit easier.
Sure. Was there anything in particular that inspired you or that brought you to that point?
Yeah, my grandmother used to talk a lot about the world as a series of modest to major catastrophic failures for people having tried to make perfection when something good would have sufficed. And what we saw in Silicon Valley 5-6 years ago in the education world was that teachers were vilified as, evil, donut-sucking, union people who don't like to work hard. And the reality is, I think there are some teachers like that, but I think most teachers are nothing like that. And so we wanted to give them some tools to actually do things better in the classroom because they're under-resourced by a lot. And my grandmother's saying of move something forward just a little bit, make a little bit of progress, that word was Shmoop. So could you Shmoop my gin and tonic? And that was kind of her most common request. So we were very, very close. And Shmoop is a kind of a shout out to her. She died 20 years ago, but we were very, very close.
Oh, wow. Well, it sounds like you've really created something that should be proud of. Yeah. But yeah, something you said about that really stuck with me. The idea of, kind of like you don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And it sounds exactly like you've created something incredibly useful and you've gotten it out there, which is really powerful, helping a lot of students out there. Tell us a little bit more about, the resources that you have there and, what sets Shmoop apart.
Sure. Well, I wrote the original guides myself. I put them up, and I didn't really think about it. We originally built Shmoop as just sort of kind of a hobby. I was going to invest a little bit of money and maybe do it as a nonprofit. I don't know. And all of a sudden, after we put up our first 50 or 60 lit guides, we had literally thousands of librarians shouting us out about how funny it was and how different it was as a product. They began recommending it to their students and their teachers, who then sent us semi-angry notes like, well, why don't you have this product? And why don't you have that product? And da, da, da. Then what happened is the principals and superintendents said, if you build this product, we'll pay you X. And so all of a sudden, we were inundated with requests to build things. So today we have 12 million customers on a monthly basis. We're in, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 schools in the U.S. There are very few people at the, kind of maybe upper third or applying to colleges and so on who don't use us, at least in some part, as part of their test preparation for courses and for our videos and guides and all the other stuff that we have.
No, that's awesome. It sounds like you've got a ton of stuff there. One thing we really love to hear on College Admissions Toolbox are stories. Could you take us to the moment in time of the worst moment you've seen or experienced related to test prep, the college admissions process, things along those lines?
Sure. Well, for me, I'm old. I'm 50 years old now. And so the world is so different today versus what it was when I was applying to college. I had terrible grades in high school, and I got into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford. I was one of the best swimmers in the country at the time, and I had very, very, very high test scores. So thankfully, they looked past my horrific grades. Today, though, with even good grades in my domain, I think I'd be lucky to be accepted into a junior college. The world is so competitive at the elite school level, and an enormous number of foreign students are coming here, sure. And the university system is having to change. One notch below the elite schools, those schools don't have any money. They're going broke. And so they have to accept a lot of foreign students who pay full cash retail, and there are no scholarships then involved. But if the universities don't change their admissions policy process to favor, or at least to be more sensitive to the economics, they will go bankrupt. And so for me, as I think about college and the whole test preparation process, there's a holistic need today that was not there before, meaning you have to think about the money. You have to think about how much debt you're going to end up with before you even begin thinking about where you might go to school, because the way the scholarship structure works today, if you're modestly wealthy, meaning middle, white collar kind of worker, you will get no help from pretty much anyone. And if you're an orthodontist married to a school teacher and you make okay money, but you have 3 kids who are all going to go to college, I guarantee you don't feel wealthy. So if your kid goes to a private college and ends up with $200,000 in debt as an English major, they'll go bankrupt. It's only a question of when, because there are no jobs for English majors today from private fine universities like that. So very, very tough situation. And so when I think about test prep, I start people structurally asking, what's the goal? How hard are you willing to work? How much are you willing to suffer to make what kind of dough, what kind of sacrifices, to have what kind of lifestyle when you're 40? And it's a very hard question for a 16-year-old to be asked. When I was 16, it was a big deal for me to cut my hair.
Different times.
Different era. And I unfortunately, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I have to start talking to her about all this stuff today, because it's so much of a crucible in the test prep piece of the world that you just can't think about it like you did in my era. The world is way, way less kind.
No, absolutely, David. So many valuable insights there that you shared. The idea that you yourself, you have the you have the knowledge to realize and the insight to realize that if you were applying today to Stanford, you might not have had a chance. Different times, different level of competition. Absolutely, that's so important to keep in mind. And at the same time, the practical value of what kind of degree you're going to get upon graduation. Really, really important to consider. Will the tuition that you're paying, is that justified considering the kind of salary you can get coming out? So what would be your advice for an applicant who's kind of in that grouping, socioeconomically, that might kind of get left out in the financial aid process?
Well, in that middle band of
Yeah.
wealth, meaning the orthodontist married to a school teacher who makes a nice living in my era, that was wealth. That was,
But you're not uber wealthy.
not uber wealthy, but
Yeah.
I don't know. In California, you make a total of $250,000. And that might sound like a lot of money in the Midwest, but you have to remember a 40-year-old, 3,000 square foot home, meaning 2.5 bedrooms, here costs $3 million. So you definitely do not feel wealthy on a few $100,000 here. And the challenge is that student can no longer go, their parents simply can't afford to send them to the private school that they probably could have gotten into. And there is some scholarship matching some abilities here and there for the school to defray some of the expenses, but it doesn't come close to covering the total bill. And so either they have to go to a UC system school, which is fine, they're great schools, but even the UC system is starting to get much more expensive as California has cut back funding. Florida, a number of other states have had to make some cutbacks in different ways. But the bigger issue is the luxury of people like me in my era. I was able to major in English. Now, I also majored in math with a computer science emphasis, but they didn't really have computer science in those days. It was considered not worthy of study. But today, to major in English, your job, your first 3 job things that you'd be looking at would be managing a health club or, taking tolls on a bridge or something. There's just no jobs anymore. And even if you write really well, you're paid so poorly, you don't have a prayer of paying back any interest on the loans that you would have taken out. So the freedom that we had in the great wealth of this country when we were exporting lots of cars in the 60s and 70s is gone. And the people who really get messed up in the process are the people who don't have a good macro view of how tight the resources and how competitive the world is becoming, so that in their generation, 2 decades from now, when they're in their 30s and just coming up in their careers, they're not left out where there's like no jobs and they're on the dole in the way, much of Europe is today with 25-30% unemployment. And a lot of very smart graduates of college who are erudite speakers of existential theory are literally taking money at toll bridges and working as baristas at Starbucks.
Sure. No, it's a different world, different era. It's sad in a way, but this is a reality that you've got to be aware of. Maybe I know on Shmoop you've got a lot of literature guides. Maybe those are better to focus on the high school level. But then when you're going to college itself, maybe you want to take a few English classes, but not necessarily major in English, considering what your economic situation is and what you hope to do afterwards.
That's right. Today, if all you do is major in English and not go to law school or some other, obvious grad school, you're marrying financial mediocrity. It will be with you the rest of your life because your distinguishing skills that the marketplace will pay for will be forever limited.
No, definitely, it's so true. And like one valuable thing you said, is the idea that, you studied, math and comp sci a little bit as well. But even back then, you said it wasn't even considered worthy of study just because going back a couple of decades, who knew the world would be where it was today? I mean, obviously, you managed to marry the two a little bit. You've got an online business that happens to cover English a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the demands on young people today to produce are excruciating. Certainly, the world that I grew up in, failure was okay. It was even encouraged, and it was sort of frowned upon that you would directly graduate college and then go to law school and then join a law firm and then have 38 years until you died of lung cancer, because people smoked a lot of cigarettes back then too. So it was the notion of having a little bit of failure and spending a year traveling around the world, maybe working for the Peace Corps, or maybe doing a short stint in the military or some other thing, I don't know, that gave you a rounder existence was championed by corporate America. Today, there are no training programs. Even the vaunted Goldman Sachs has shut down most of its analyst training program. IBM's training program's gone. Procter & Gamble's is pretty much gone. So there isn't the embracing of post-college education that used to exist in this country, in part because companies are owned by shareholders, and those efforts were not economically very efficient, at least in the short run. And so shareholders voted and pushed and cajoled management to get rid of them, shut them down, save costs, and go buy back more shares, pay a higher dividend. And people yell at evil corporations for doing this. Well, the people who own the corporations are the public. It's your parents' pension funds that own and control most of these things. So it's a very difficult situation from the management side, because they'll turn their pockets inside out and say, what are we supposed to do here, guys?
Oh, I mean, Dave, it seems like you really have a good business lens view of things. You're out in Silicon Valley. You have the English background, but you're kind of in that world a little bit. And it looks like you're seeing what these corporations are doing to adjust to new economic realities, new realities of globalization and technological advancement. So a lot of our listeners out there, maybe they are hoping to go work at Goldman or go work at IBM. And given that you're saying these postgraduate training programs are cutting back a bit, maybe due to economic necessity on the part of these firms, saying, learn as much as you can in college, don't major in English, and then go through our training program. To our listeners out there who do hope to work at one of these big companies, what would your advice be?
Well, there are some basic things that are presumed as opposed to requested, meaning being able to write clearly and succinctly is a presumed skill now. It's not something you learn in college or you learn afterwards. With social media, kids are much more fluent or fluid on a text-based medium. So that part of the world is kind of solving itself. But if you can't write well and communicate well, you're doomed. So, people think about Goldman Sachs as a company that is maybe heavy on math and investing and stock brokerage and so on. That's a very small percentage of anyone who's smart enough to get a second interview at Goldman can learn the mathematics part of it. But you can't teach someone to articulate clearly their ideas. And, or at least it's very hard to do that if you didn't start when they were 4 years old. So the structure of that kind of learning has changed. And the whole notion of relationships mattering at a very young age has also changed. It used to be that you could graduate college and then go shake a few hands, get a bunch of interviews, and the tough to get jobs you could get. You'd walk in and you were done. Today, it doesn't work like that. At the elite levels, you need to have a relationship with the alumni from your college, starting your freshman year probably of college. And for a lot of people in high school, they do internships at IBM or Google or the various hot companies in Silicon Valley here. It all starts in high school. So they know these people 3 or 4 or 5 years before they then graduate college. And so then they're hired. Why is that the case? Because there's less risk. One of the most expensive elements for a corporation is to make a bad hire. And if to try to fire anyone in California takes reams of paper and years, and it costs literally millions of dollars. So corporations are loath to make a bad hire decision because there's so many lawyers chasing, people who got fired for this reason and that they simply don't hire anymore. They won't hire with a high risk situation. So when you've known someone 5 years, they've interned for you in the summers, you've kept in touch every month or two, you get a little update letter and so on. You've had then 50, 60, maybe 100 points of intersection with that person by the time they've finally graduated college. So then there's less risk that they're actually a knife-wielding lunatic who, does bad things in the commissary.
Sure.
So very different tolerance of risk, taking risk on new people. And the way that risk gets mitigated is people have a relationship build very early in their careers.
Definitely. That's such valuable advice, David, in so many contexts. Whether they like you, whether they know you, building that relationship early, familiarity and consistency are so key. And these are insights that not only apply to looking for a job, but they also apply to interactions with teachers, administrators at your high school, administrators at your college, your professors, and admissions offices. Following up, the importance of sending a thank you, giving them those additional data points. If you apply to college and then you're waitlisted or deferred and you want to update them later in the school year with how you're doing, that little bit of follow-up. It says you're on top of things, you really want this, you care, and additional letters that go in your file they can look at later when it comes to time to make that admissions decision, just like when you're talking to Goldman, when it comes time to make that hire, when you're looking to work somewhere else too. So definitely relationships, building them early, so important.
Yeah, that's true. And at the college level, there's a bifurcation today that is pronounced in that there's a big difference between an applicant and an application. An applicant meaning a human being where they sort of know who you are and they think about your personality and da-da-da-da-da. What's happened is the data around that has been so poor as an indicator of success in admissions that most admission departments have gone away from the whole notion of really trying to get to know the human being, because on paper, with so many prep schools and public schools like well trained for how to write just the right letter of recommendation and your own personal statement being almost Teflon, that they've gone back to favoring an application where they want whatever diversity there is, whatever athletes and nerds and politicians and I don't know, everyone in between, so that they have a campus that reflects some element of like real life, so that there is true diversity there that broadens and deepens the learning experience beyond the classroom. So when people think about applying to colleges, you have to kind of understand from the admissions officer's perspective what the room is that they're trying to build. And you shouldn't try to be anyone you're not, but you should try to make it clear who you are. Because if all you are is Teflon, then you're just like everybody else, where there isn't a soul or pathos to the application that then humanizes it and makes it tangible and somebody you want to sit down and go watch a football game with or go play a round of golf with or something like that, where there's kind of a non-roboticness to the actual process.
No, absolutely. It's so important. I mean, you want to show that you have a personality, that you're a real human being, and get them to like you. And that's gotta, they're reading a million of these applications, obviously, but the college essay and the letters of rec are really points, those data points where you can make an impact and show them that you are not a robot, that you're not a nerd, that you're someone they would like to have a conversation with, someone they would like to have on their campus. And yeah, they're looking to create a diverse campus, have lots of people with interesting stories to share. And so to the extent that you can show how interesting you are, that's going to be really, really important. So really keep that in mind and make yourself come alive on the page.
Yeah, exactly.
And it comes back to writing well. That's a huge part of it. I want to shift. Sorry, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say the whole notion of writing well. It's about clarity. So much is about, being able to, in a few words, describe what moves you, what you care about, what your mission is, in the short 100 years or so that you're on this earth. What are you going to leave? And having a maturity about you that distinguishes you. If you have that will definitely set you apart from the crowd.
Can you give us some examples of that you've seen, in applications of some kind or essays you've looked at or things, or even job applications?
Yeah, the most poignant application I've ever read was from a modestly good student with just so scores in his SAT and so on. And he was from Zagreb, Croatia, and he was applying to Stanford for the business school. His opening line of his essay was, my application was 2 weeks delayed because my father and I were captured. It was something like this. My father and I were captured and tortured by the Serbs for about 8 months, and I just got out of the hospital. He has died, but I have almost fully recovered. The reason I want to come to America and study at Stanford is I want to understand why people do this to each other. So that was his first paragraph, and I pretty much was done. I'm like, okay, I don't care what it takes to get this guy in. Let's get him a scholarship. Let's get whatever he needs. Let's get this in. We need more people like this running things on the planet. And so every now and then you have a guy like that who's just phenomenal is just talented and had the wherewithal and thought to get an application out to an American university.
Wow, no, that's really something. I mean, obviously, such a compelling story like that, how can you say no to a human being who's been through that and has that insight, that kind of insight to offer? But what about our listeners out there who don't have such, incredible experiences? And I say incredible, it can also be a negative thing, of course, but someone who hasn't had that kind of exciting, crazy sort of background. You know what I mean?
Sure. For the letter of recommendation and for a normal high school kid, it's all about showing your humanity and having a sense of awareness, mainly self-awareness. I have seen applications that talk about how little opportunity their great-grandparents had in Russia versus what they have today. That a great day back then was a day the cows gave milk and the Cossacks would come and beat you. So one essay was great. It was just about all the whining they saw about people that compared to their great-grandparents that people just shut up and get their work done. So having a maturity and awareness can come from anything. You can do it with a sense of humor. I saw one that was titled Nostril Hair, and it was about a girl who's very short, and she was looking up at people all the time and talking about everyone else's lack of self-awareness, and talked about nostril hair shaving as something that is a good indicator of whether people understand that other people are looking up into them and trying to reflect back something. So you definitely do not have to have been a captured prisoner in Serbia to tell a great story. But you do have to ask where you fit on this earth and why the administration will lean toward getting you as opposed to somebody else. Tons and tons of applications to me that I read are narrow and parochial. It's about kids writing about a bad breakup on a Saturday night that left them with an awareness that they really needed to get another boy or girlfriend. And you read things like that and you're like, yeah, this person would add nothing distinctive about them, to our campus, so pass. And the application letter today, in a world of extreme grade inflation and test score inflation, where there's thousands and thousands of perfect GPAs and perfect test score people applying every year, not nearly enough to fill up the whole Ivy League and the next 20 schools, that personal statement that you write has become more important than it ever was before.
Absolutely. And, whether you've been captured in Serbia or, you're the grandchild of immigrants, or whether you're just someone who's short and looking at people's nostril hair all the time, you can really, write a compelling personal essay, and be unique and stand out regardless of what you've actually done or experienced. Even just that reflection, that insight, that level of maturity, and showing that you can stand out and really, take a mundane topic and make it something that people want to read. Absolutely, it's so important, and really shows that you'll be a colorful person, at least, no matter what you've done or where you've been, that will contribute something unique to the campus. So not just an ordinary high school kid, no matter what. So those are some really great examples. I have to remember the nostril hair one. That's so good. Love it. I want to shift gears now and ask you about a moment of insight or revelation or some sort of light bulb moment that you've seen or experienced related to education. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah. So Shmoop sells to an extremely wide range of schools in the country, from the wealthiest prep schools on the East Coast to the poorest schools in Central California, where most of the children are children of illegal immigrants and farming community and so on. So a number of these schools have never had a student go to college. So we had one of our integration salespeople who sets up their computers and so on go into the auditorium, and they got a standing ovation for about 5 minutes. And the guy's looking around. He had no idea what was going on. The school had their first 5 on a calculus AP. That student took the advanced and elective courses on Shmoop and got into college, and he got a scholarship, and he's going. First person in school. So you can imagine, we take for granted so many things in this country that, oh, well, everyone goes to college, right? Well, no, not anything close to everyone goes to college. And a lot of people just don't have the resources or a clue about what that means. And so there was this, quote, accident, unquote, of this ungodly smart at math kid. Like, you would not think that the children of illegal immigrants who were doing farming work in Central California would end up being a savant in math. And this guy was. And he had not only that intellect, but he also had the drive and family support and school support to do whatever it took to get him to college so he could build a better life for his, progeny. So that was the moment. And I kind of sat there, we were around the office almost crying. That's what we're all about. If I could do that, if I could have one of those a week or a day or a month or whatever, my life would be good. I could check the box, and when I'm dead, I could go meet God and say, I did good for you on this earth.
That's an incredible story. And there are so many people out there who knows what they could achieve if they had access to educational opportunities, access to resources like what you guys at Shmoop are providing. You know what I mean? Like, that kid got a 5 on the calculus AP. He's going to go forward now. He's going to go somewhere and make something out of that. And if he's not learning that math and not getting that AP score, and his parent, he just goes into the fruit picking like his parents were, maybe, he doesn't have that opportunity. So kudos to you guys for achieving that. It's definitely inspiring. And, anyone who's doing great things with education is having similar impacts all the time. And for that, every story like that, there's a million that you even aren't aware of. So be inspired by that. Be proud of that. No, that's absolutely great, David. Good for you guys. I want to shift gears now, move into my favorite part of the interview, which is the lightning round. I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. You give me some rapid fire responses. Are you ready?
Ready.
Awesome. What's your number one piece of advice for the college admissions process?
Have self-awareness. Be sure that you understand this notion of the applicant and the application, so that you understand how people perceive you, as well as you understand how you are expressing yourself.
Absolutely. You've got to come across as a real person. What's one habit that you believe contributes to success?
Never quitting.
So key. What's one online admissions related resource that you absolutely love?
Well, beyond Shmoop, I actually, crazy as it sounds, there's a lot of government data out there that is tangibly available. And for me, is fascinating. It gives you all the statistics and the daunting odds that you're looking at of having success in a given elite career track or whatever it is that you want to do, just how hard it is to make the world work. So all the education.gov sites are what I live on.
No, absolutely. There's so much information out there, and you've got to know what the situation is out there. What's one book that you believe no college applicant should be without?
Wow, that's a good one. I would say a book called The Goal. The Goal, not a widely read book, and I can't even remember the author's name, but it's a short 200-page book that talks about what it means to achieve goals and to have and how much better life is when you actually have a goal or something you're shooting for, as opposed to meandering toward something. That book is the first book they give you at Stanford Business School the first week when you start, that kind of frames your whole career.
We'll link to it in the show notes. We'll look up the author and check it out. Thanks so much for that recommendation. What are you up to these days? What are you working on?
Well, we have about 350 writers and artists who contribute to Shmoop all around the world. We're building about 200 videos a month now. We have about 300 courses live now and about 300 more coming. The whole site's being translated into Arabic, Chinese, Spanish, and Korean. Much of it's already out now, about to address a very large global audience. And in one word, what we're up to is just more.
It sounds like you're doing that. The translations, global reach, going to be super valuable, going to make a super huge impact, like the story of that student you shared in California, reaching many more people. So excited for great things to come from you guys. Thanks so much for being on College Admissions Toolbox, David. Take care.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
There are a million books out there about applying to college, but it's hard to know which ones are worth buying and which are just a waste of time. When I was applying to college, I felt like most of them weren't really saying anything that I didn't already know. And a lot of the others were just plain boring. So I've put together a list of the best books I've read on the admissions process. I've got books on there about college essays, scholarships, and test prep. So check it out. It's at collegeadmissionstoolbox.com/books. Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams.